بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this a gathering of knowledge such that the angels encompass us with their mercy. And inshallah, may this be placed in our scale of good deeds yawm al-qiyamah, inshallah. Ameen. So I have a list of 31 questions. No particular order, and they're of course anonymous, so I'll begin with the list I have them. The first question is, must we perform ablution, wudu, before showering if our previous ablution is intact, or is it necessary to renew it? So if you have wudu and you haven't lost your wudu, it's a sunnah to renew your wudu. So in this case, no, you don't have to renew your wudu because you already have it. If you renew it, it's a sunnah, it's an act of worship. I've heard that combining Zamzam water with regular drinking water diminishes its special blessing and benefits. Given limited access to Zamzam water, how should we proceed? I mix it with alkaline water for daily consumption in a bottle. Is it okay? This is the condition of the modern Muslim mind, right? When we think of everything and we quantify it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah encompasses everything. Inna rahmati wasi'at kulli shay. Allah's mercy encompasses everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is over all things able. The barakah of drinking Zamzam is not something that's quantifiable. It's a quality that Allah ta'ala has placed in the Zamzam. Because the Zamzam that we drink today is not like the Zamzam in the past. To start out with, it's changed. Its constitution has changed. And things like that. So don't think like that when it comes to these matters, because you can't quantify the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to pour some of the Zamzam water in the other water, you want to pour some Zamzam water in your coffee in the morning, do that, and inshallah have the intention when you drink the Zamzam, like the Prophet ﷺ said, that there is an accepted dua in the drinking of Zamzam. And many of the Salihin used to subsist only on drinking Zamzam. So there are many people in the history of Islam that would only drink Zamzam. They lived in Mecca just off of that. And many of the Salihins, they've written about their experience in drinking Zamzam and their du'as that was answered in drinking Zamzam. And there's a book that's been recently published by what I believe is one of my ancestors about the blessings of Zamzam, and it's in Arabic. It's not a long book, but the name escapes me. But it has many of these stories and many of these blessings in it. So the Zamzam story is something that is wide, and as we said, it's an accepted dua. So just take that as it is and don't be consumed with the quantity of it. Could we fast one day with multiple intentions, including making up missed fasts, qada roza, observing the sunnah fast on Monday and Thursday, fastings on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of the Islamic calendar to seek Allah's assistance with personal matters, praying for the recovery of someone who's ill, and addressing social issues? No. If you have a fast, a Ramadan fast that you have to make up, when you make up that fast, your intention can only be for making up that fast. But Imam al-Shafi'i said, if you make up that fast, and that make-up day happens to fall on a day that's a sunnah to fast, inshallah you will get double the reward. But you can't make the intention other than to make up the qada. When it comes to sunnah fast, you can have multiple intentions. But when it comes up to making up a fard, your intention can only be to make up that fard. So as I said, let's say I owe 5 days from last Ramadan, and I want to fast on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of the lunar month with the intention of making up my days. Inshallah, I will get double the reward. I will get the reward for making up the days, plus I will get the reward for sunnah. But the intention for the fard has to be exclusive for the fard. As you may be aware, Costco has a generous return policy allowing returns for dissatisfaction or product spoilage. When I shop at Costco, I typically purchase enough food to last 2 weeks. However, there are occasions when I don't find the time to cook, or by the time I intend to prepare or consume the items, they have gone bad. This is particularly noticeable with organic, vegetable, dairy products like half and half and similar perishables. I feel it's a sin to return them, as it was my fault to not cook on time. Some friends have told me it's okay, it's their policy, and it's okay to return. Please guide us. So I actually looked at the return policy on Costco's website. I didn't really find anything related to foods. I don't know why. I mean, obviously I didn't spend that much time doing it. But if it's within the return policy, then from the Sharia point of view, there's no problem. But the better course of action would be for you to donate the food to people that need the food, because there are people that have food shortage and food insecurities, and there are food banks in the area, and we have a food bank type service through ICCP as well. So you can turn this situation into something great, which is you can give the food to people that have. And know that when you give a grocery store, you return something, and the expiration date is going to be close, and they have a certain calculus for this, they themselves will also give the food away. So eventually it is donated. So you can circumvent that by donating it and get the reward, or as long as you are within the policy of the return and you are not doing something to deceive them, then inshallah it is permissible. I have lost track of the number of rak'ahs I've prayed during my salah. For instance, during the 4 rak'ahs of dhuhr, I mistakenly think I've completed 2 and start reciting the tashahhud only to later realize I've only done 1. On other occasions, I may end up praying 5 rak'ahs instead. In such cases, I restart my prayer from the beginning. I make so many mistakes. What should I do? This matter is something that is quite simple to solve. So do not restart your prayer, but rather, if you are confused in the number of rak'ahs that you're in, you default to the lower number. So am I in rak'ah 1 or rak'ah 2? Automatically, the answer is you're in rak'ah 1. Am I in rak'ah 4 or rak'ah 3? Automatically, the answer is you're in rak'ah 3, and build on that. And if it ends up that you prayed 5 rak'ahs or 6 rak'ahs, then that extra is just extra reward for you. So do not give in to the whisperings and stop and start and stop and start, but just keep going and default to the lower number. If you do that consistently, then that whispering, inshallah, will go away. If it doesn't go away, then you need to see a doctor, not me. Sometimes, particularly before Maghrib, I engage in supplication, munajat, and then the adhan begins. I've heard that I should interrupt my prayer and listen to the adhan. However, I've also observed some friends who continue praying despite the adhan. Please guide us. What is impermissible is speaking over the adhan. So Anas stands and gives the adhan, and then you start yelling because you want to be heard. That's what's haram. But you don't do that. But when the adhan goes and you're in the middle of something, the adhan like punctures the time. So sometimes it just comes upon you, it springs upon you. So I'm in the middle of reading some Quran, or I'm in the middle of prayer, or I'm making dua. It's okay. You can finish that dua, and then you can repeat what you've missed from the adhan. What is impermissible is us to start yelling. And when we were in Azhar and we were in class, obviously the adhan would happen multiple times. The Shaykh continued teaching if he was in the middle of a point or answering a question, but he wouldn't, start yelling over the adhan. That's what's impermissible. Just like when the Quran is being recited, the same question that you could sort of a derivative of this question is, well, what happens if I hear the adhan being recited, the Quran being recited? We know that فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ, we have to listen to the Quran. But you can also passively listen. The Quran can be playing in the background. So if I'm walking in the marketplace and the adhan is playing, it doesn't mean I have to stop and sit there and listen to the adhan, or else I'll never get through what I need to do. So the point is not to speak over the adhan? The Quran. The point is not to speak over the Quran. So Anas is reciting the Quran on Friday, and we're talking in the line, and I start yelling so that my friend can hear me, and I'm yelling over the Quran. That's what's haram. But somebody asks you a question, your son is with you and they're asking you a question of what time prayer starts, or somebody's new to the mosque and Anas is reading the Quran, you can answer. That's not haram. That's not speaking over the Quran. So pay attention to that, because we underestimate the power of the passive listening of the Quran. So passive listening is also, there's a strength in that, and that's something that I encourage people to do so they get more Quran time, is you should have the Quran playing all the time. uh, whether you are actively listening to it or not. Under what name should I slaughter the sheep, goat, cow during Eid al-Adha in the future? I usually use my deceased father by name by tradition. Is the dhabiha can be said under a living person, and what is the benefit or hasanat for the person named in doing so? Okay, don't phrase the question like that. The name that you use when you slaughter is Allah's name. You say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. So I hope we all understand, we understand that. But the idea is you want to do this act of qurbah and donate the reward of this act to your deceased father. And all of the acts that we do in this dunya, we can reward the reward of to the deceased except for the prayer. The namaz, the prayer, that's for each individual. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. The prayer has been allotted for each person specifically at specific times. Everything else, you can fast for the deceased, you can give donations on behalf of the deceased, you can do the dhabiha on behalf of the deceased, any type of charity, sadaqah jariyah, so on and so forth. And you could also do it for those that are living as well, to donate the reward for that person. So all of that is permissible. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told us one of the things that all of our actions are cut off when we die, except for three, and one of them is waladun salih yad'u lah, a pious ancestor, a descendant that will continue to make supplication for them. And we know that we can make hajj for the deceased as long as we've done hajj for ourselves. And the hajj constitutes of reading the Quran and prayer and fasting and tawaf and sa'i and dua and all of those. So the ulama say if something like the entirety of the hajj, the reward can go, so do its subdivisions, with the notable exception of the prayer, as I mentioned, because it's specific to each person. So if somebody has deceased and hasn't prayed or missed prayers, you can't make up those prayers. But if somebody deceased hasn't fasted, you can make up those fasts for them, or you can do kafara. So you want to do this for your deceased parent or grandparent, inshallah, that's fine. Is it permissible for the wife to lead a prayer at home? Yani not lead men, but she can lead the prayer if there are other women in the home. Of course, women can pray in jama'ah. I mean, we could have a women-only jama'ah in the mosque, for example, if we wanted to. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But women don't lead men. The condition for the leader of the prayer in the vast majority of the opinions is that it has to be a man. There is a very weak opinion that's held by a few people, actually ironically, or not ironically, but most notably Ibn Arabi, the famous Sufi, Sheikh al-Akbar, he had this position as well because he was a mujtahid, that women can lead men in prayer, basing it on the hadith of that Sayyidah Aisha alayha salam used to lead the people of her house in prayer, and amongst them was a man. But that position is too unique to be taken by us as a community, because it would really have to be an extenuating circumstance. So that's not something that I would feel comfortable that we or the community follow, because there's no need for that to follow that opinion. But of course, if women are, if they're like little kids and she's teaching them how to pray and things like that, that's different. Okay. You mentioned on Quran night that the Quran was revealed and then was written in 10 versions. Who was the first person who wrote the Quran and which version was used? I am confused. When the language of the Quran is Arabic, why is it used in 10 versions? And by changing versions, does the meaning change? No. The Quran was written in one script. You have to be careful with the words. The words that I use, that there is one script of the Quran, ar-rasm. The rasm of the Quran, the script of the Quran is called the Uthmanic script, ar-rasm al-Uthmani. And it is, the definition of the Quran is that it is the entire Quran from the Fatiha to the Nas written in the Uthmanic script. That is the technical definition of the Quran. The Quranic script, the Rasm al-Uthmani, has certain rules of how it is written. And those rules of how the verses are written with that script has the capacity in the script to have the 10 recitations of the Quran. The recitation is different than the script. There's only one script of the Quran, the Uthmanic script. But there are 10 recitations, how you pronounce certain words, how you connect certain verses, so on and so forth. So there's one script, the Quran is in Arabic. It was written at the time of revelation on different parchments. It was gathered into one mushaf during the time of the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But then when it was written, at that mushaf didn't have any dots on the letters. And then when it came to the Khilafah of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, they rewrote the mushaf, the same mushaf, in a clear script with the dots, and they made 7 to 9 different versions of it. So it's one script, but there are 10 qira'at, 10 recitations of the Quran. And that has to go, farsh al-huruf, how the letters are pronounced and how they are connected and things like that. And there is no change in meaning of the verses, of course, from the point of view of the qira'at, but they have different flavors of emphasis on different components or different words. But from the point of view of the meaning of the Quran, of course, the meanings are endless of the Quran, and the tafsir is something different else that keeps going on and on and on. So I hope that is clear, inshallah. I have an Asian script Quran which does not have 15 verses on a page, as you mentioned, and it does not start or end with a verse. That's fine. There are different printings of the same Quran. The 15 verse per page, as I mentioned, is an Ottoman instrument that came about maybe several hundred years ago, called Dar Kanar, and that just has become the standard way that the Quran is printed, because it's just each juz in that printing of the Quran is almost the same number of pages. Each juz is 20 pages. If you have that 15 verses, it starts with a verse and it ends with a verse. So if you look at the Mus'haf now, it'll be a little over 600 pages, because you have the Fatiha and the first 5 ayat of Al-Baqarah that are done nicely, and then the last couple pages, there is the surah heading, so it takes up a little bit more page, a couple extra pages. And in that printing, it just becomes evenly distributed, the pages, and it becomes easy to memorize. As I said, because of the Hadith of Al-Bayhaqi, that whoever memorizes the Quran 5 by 5 will not forget. So 5 times 3 is 15, so there are 15 lines. And even that's one of the mechanisms of memorizing, is that you try to memorize 5 lines at a time until you get the whole page, etc. But if you don't have that, that's fine. It's completely okay. But it is, by the time our children and grandchildren are of age, probably the 15-line Mus'haf will be the only Mus'haf to be around. Probably. I want to ask about the Hanafi fatwa regarding corrupt contracts in non-Muslim countries with non-Muslims. Does this include the buying and selling of corporate bonds here in the US? Since we do not know every single shareholder of a company, should we assume that they are all non-Muslims? Okay, first of all, there is nothing wrong with buying a corporate bond. So it's incorrect to assume, you slip that in, like as if the corporate bond is haram. There's nothing wrong with a corporate bond or a county bond or a state bond, etc., or the federal government bond. So bonds are not haram. I don't know who told you that the bonds are haram. Even the crazies will say that the bonds are haram, or maybe they do, I don't know, but they're crazy, it doesn't matter. But the bonds are not haram. So let's exclude that from the question. It's not a Hanafi fatwa, this is the Hanafi madhab. This is the position of Imam Abu Hanifa himself, radiallahu anhu, that al-uqud al-fasida, that contracts that have corruption in them are permissible for Muslims to engage in non-Muslim lands if they are legal in those lands and done with other non-Muslims. So dealing with ribawi transactions, buying and selling of alcohol, buying and selling of pig products, if it is permissible in the country that a Muslim resides in, and it's a non-Muslim country, then Imam Abu Hanifa said it's permissible for a Muslim to engage in those contracts. So this is not a fatwa, this is the position of Imam Abu Hanifa. So there is a lot of confusion about that, because you have to understand that the Sharia is a very precise instrument. Law usually is not. Law is a blunt instrument, at least how it's practiced in this country. But the Sharia is very fine. It's like think of, like ENT surgery, and you have to have fine tools to get fine, cuts. The Sharia is like that. So when people ask questions that are just sloppy, this is how things can get misunderstood. So the position is not saying you, all of you, should go out and buy and sell alcohol. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that if you did that, if you had a grocery store or a convenience store or a restaurant and there was that in it, it would be permissible according to this position. So sometimes people think that it means you have to go out and do that. It's not what it's saying. It's saying that it is permissible because there is nothing illegal about that in this country or in European countries or other, Muslim, non-Muslim countries. Of course, everyone drinks alcohol except us. So therefore, it's something that is permissible for the reason. And Imam Abu Hanifa has like 8 or 9 proof texts of that are quite strong. Of course, the other madhab, Shafi'i, Malik, and Imam Ahmed don't say that. They say it's haram universally. But Imam Abu Hanifa, he noticed in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ that there were different rules that were taking place in Mecca before the conquest of Mecca that were taking place at Medina. So he deduced from that there's a difference of how the Sharia is practiced in a Muslim majority context versus its practiced in a non-Muslim majority context. I hope that's clear, inshallah. Okay, sorry about that. My friend is starting a medical practice and just graduated from medical school. He wanted to ask about interest-bearing loans taken for business and commercial purposes. Are they permissible if there's a collateral asset between them, like the fatwa for the mortgages? Yes, because it's not a loan, it is finance, a tamwil. And the modern fiqh distinguishes between a loan, like what you find in the traditional fiqh, which is haram, not for the riba but for other reasons, and versus finance. So if it's finance based and there's assets, etc., then inshallah it's permissible. In terms of zakah on ETFs, I find this very confusing. What I have done is look into the sectors that the ETF is invested in as of the zakat date, and then taking a look at the percentage of commercial/trade shares in the ETF and calculating zakat on those. Is this correct? Yes, in the sense that the ETFs it's a fund, that is invested in stocks. So how do you pay zakat on shares, stock shares? First of all, you have to determine is the company that, if you can, is the company that you're investing in a manufacturing company? If it's a manufacturing company, there's no zakat on that because that is sana'ah. That's manufacturing. Manufacturing, people that manufacture medicine, people that manufacture planes and things like that, that's sana'ah. But if it's tijara, if it's trade and or services, so you invest in, in the cell phone company or something, or in a bank, it's a service, etc. All of those companies, those shares have zakat in it, and the zakat is just 2.5%. Meaning, once you have the share, you count 12 months, a lunar year, that is, from the time you have the share. When the hawl finishes, when that period finishes, you see the value of your stocks, and then you pay 2.5% on that. If I understand the question correctly, then you are doing it correctly. Of course, given that the stocks, the amalgamated mass is above the nisab, is above the minimal zakatable amount, which is the dollar amount of 85 grams of 21 karat gold. So you have to go, I didn't do that before I came. It should be around $6,000. That's the minimal zakatable amount. So if the shares that you owned are less than that, then aslan you don't have to pay any zakah. But if you have more than that, inshallah you do, then you're just going to wait till the year ends. Let's just say the 1st of Ramadan is when you pay your zakah. On the 1st of Ramadan, you're going to go onto the app and see, or to your account and see how much your portfolio is worth. Exclude the Manufacturing companies if you can, or if it's just an altogether mixed fund, then assume that you're going to pay zakat and just pay 2.5% on the value of the stocks. So stocks, they take the ruling of zakat of trade goods, urud al-tijara, and it's simple like that. Now, if you have to spend a little bit of effort, didn't you spend effort to make the money and invest it? So don't come to the Sharia and say it's too complicated. And you just spend 5-10 minutes figuring that out. It's not going to be rocket science. Okay, how can we make up for the prayers that we missed? By praying the prayers that you missed. So if you owe prayers, no matter how many they are, there is no sunnah prayer for you. You have to pray the fard prayer. And when you pray the fard prayer that you missed in the past, you will be rewarded more than if you had prayed the sunnah. So you finish salat al-dhuhr, stand up and pray for another dhuhr that you missed in the past. You pray salat al-asr, afterwards stand and pray another asr that you missed from the past. And just to keep a tally and keep in mind that you are getting more reward doing that than if you were praying the sunnah prayers. Can we request for dua? I have no barakah in my house. I feel that my house is not blessed. What prayer recitals should I indulge in to bring tranquility? Well, inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put barakah in all of our homes, and may the light of the Quran and the light of the Prophet ﷺ infuse all aspects of our lives and our homes. There are simple things that you can do for this, all of us. This is sort of for all of us. Number one is you have to make sure that your house is clean. Not OCD clean, but I mean, clean, just basically clean. Like take the trash out at night, make sure that, the bathroom's clean, the toilet seat's covered. There's no, trash around. There are no dishes and old stuff, moldy stuff growing in the refrigerator and the kitchen and things like that. And you have to maintain a clean house. The second thing is you have to make sure that what you're eating is halal. This is why I don't like that opinion of that you can eat any meat and chicken and things like that. I've talked about that before because it can affect the barakah. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Atib mat'amak takun mustajab ad-du'a." Make sure that what you eat and drink is halal, Allah will accept your dua. So make sure that what you bring into the house is halal. And then from the point of view of the spirit, and of course you have to pray. It has to be a home, has to be a place of prayer. And when you do the prayer in the house, that's when you attract the angels and you attract all of that barakah. That's why when you come to ICCP, everyone's always happy because that's all we do here. That's what we do, is we pray and we fast and we read Quran and we talk about these kind of things. So this is like a concentrated place where all of those things are happening. Well, your home needs to be the same way, that when you come into the home, this is a place where we pray. If we can, we pray as a family, etc. And then other than those are like kind of low-hanging fruits, is the recitation of the Quran. So you can have the Quran playing. You can open up like Surah Al-Baqarah on YouTube and just have it playing in the background. You can have it even playing when you're not in the house. That's very important, especially Surah Al-Baqarah in the home, and prayers on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I recommend that everyone find a way to find an accessible version of Dala'ul al-Khairat, which is the most famous manual for prayers on the Prophet ﷺ. There are several copies that are available in English and transliteration, and you can even find audio recordings of that. In addition to the prayer and the recitation of the Quran, the more prayers we do on the Prophet ﷺ, the more that you will find the barakah in your house in no time, inshallah. What forms can the jinn take? Animals, humans, etc. And what can we do to prevent encounters with the bad jinn? So the jinn can take the forms of people. You probably met many people who you think are jinn. And they can take the form of animals and whatnot. Shayateen al-insi wal jinn, that exists, unfortunately. And even if they're not jinn, they act like they're jinn. What can we do to protect ourselves from bad jinn? Make sure that you are in a state of wudu most of the time, and just pray the 5 daily prayers. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, "Inna kayda shaytani kana da'ifa." The machinations of the Satan is weak. So even though we believe in Satan and the jinn and his minions and so on and so forth, we also equally believe that their power is very weak. This idea that there's a power of evil that's equivalent to the power of good is a non-Islamic belief. This idea that there's some type of duality, it goes back to Zoroastrianism. It's not our tradition. We do not believe in the power of Satan. We believe in la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And oftentimes, as Muslims, we talk about that because we just want to hang our problems on something else. And you know who our problem is? When we go home and we look in the mirror, that's our problem. Right? That's our problem. We are our worst enemy. And it's so easy to blame the jinn, the dog jinn or whatever, then you blame yourself. So honestly, the jinn is a non-issue. You should not be thinking about it. One time we were in class. This was an usul al-fiqh class, like at the highest level. It's a very, very philosophy and theology and grammar. And in my class where the sheikh would sit, the whole first row is all of these books, dictionaries and different madahib books. And so in case we need to look something up, we're looking them up. It's a very academic, very scholastic thing. And we're reading, the sheikh is reading and whatnot. And then some guy walks in and then he starts asking a question about the jinn. So the sheikh kind of just answered it similar to the way I answered it and wanted to go back to the class. And the man kept insisting. So the sheikh said, okay, I guess there's no knowledge today. And he closed the book and he put it away and he said, okay, tell me about, the jinn. So it's not considered something serious. It's like 1,001 nights, right? Alf layla wa layla kind of thing. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It exists. But when a child falls off a tree and hits their head, they need to go to the doctor, not to the jinn expert, because they fell on their head. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what the man was telling the sheikh. He said this kid fell and hit his head and he's possessed with a jinn. And the sheikh says, you don't think that maybe it's because he fell on his head, that's the problem? And he's like, no, because the jinn told me. He's like, I'm telling you, qala Allah wa qala Rasulullah, and you're telling me, qala al-jinn. And it devolved into, we just all started laughing because it was so ridiculous. So don't give so much stock into the stories of the jinn. The basic thing that you do as a Muslim is enough to protect you from any type of evil. And remember that you are your worst enemy and you need to work on yourself. All of us. I need to work on myself. All of us need to work on ourselves. Sometimes when we ask Allah for something and we promise with ourselves that if Allah will accept this, we will fast, like for example, Monday or Thursday, but if we can't make it, what is the compensation? This is kafaratul yameen. You have to expiate for an oath. First of all, to say, I'm going to do something good, I'm going to pray 100 rak'ahs if this thing happens. The ulama say that this is a sign of a stingy person. That if you were not stingy with Allah, you would have prayed the 100 rak'ahs regardless if this happens or doesn't happen. So this is not a good habit to get into. But if you promise, if you make an oath like this and you break the oath, you have to feed 10 people. In the Shafi'i madhab, it's 510 grams of food per person. I did the calculation before I came. It's like $10, $12 expiation per oath. So it can cost you something if you keep doing it. So don't get in the habit of doing that. I have difficulty in making wudu in my workplace, and that makes dhuhr prayer very difficult. Can I pray dhuhr and asr together later during the asr time? Yes, you can pray the dhuhr and asr later, or you can pray them earlier, depending on winter or summer. And you can do the same with maghrib and isha. And if you get stuck, you can also, if you make wudu in the morning and you put on socks, you can wipe over your socks when you're making wudu. If you have to renew your wudu, that sometimes will be easier. But to avoid the prayer and the work situation altogether, because sometimes it is difficult, I admit, you can combine the prayers, no problem. How can I change my madhab to Hanafi and Shafi'i? Is it possible? Are there procedures for it? No, the madhab is for the scholar, not for the average Muslim. The average Muslim's madhab is the madhab of the person who teaches them. So in this case, either me, I'm teaching you, or Imam al-Rafa'i, that's what you follow. But the madhab is something that's incumbent upon someone like me. Like when I go to study, I have to study I can't go to 4 colleges at the same time. I have to go to one madhab, one college to study that system of law as best as I can. In the course of studying, you learn about the others as well, and you know how you can take and pick and choose. But that is required for the person who is a student of knowledge, who is training to be a scholar. As far as the lay person is concerned, there is no madhab for the lay person. So don't concern yourself with those issues. Rather, just learn how to practice your Islam in the easiest most comfortable way possible. That is the best type of Islam. Islam that is easy. And that is what the Prophet ﷺ liked. He liked religion that was easy and simple. And our job is to make the religion as easy and as simple for you. So don't be concerned with that. As far as people that are experts and whatnot, it's just following another madhab. It's just like, today I'm going to read Shakespeare and tomorrow I'm going to read William Blake. It's just, you just read another book and you just start doing that. It's just, there's nothing to it. There's nothing formal. It's not like a mafia where you've sworn like an oath and you can't get out of it. It's about personal practice. Is the congregational prayer led by my son who is 13 years old acceptable at home while all others who are adults pray behind him? Yeah, that's fine as long as he knows how to pray correctly and recite Surah Al-Fatiha. When I contribute to the disaster fund in Morocco, Libya, is it zakah or sadaqah? Yani there are people amongst those who are affected that are zakah eligible, the poor and the needy, al-fuqara wal-masakin, and wal-gharimin, people that are in debt. For sure, people have gone in debt because of this tremendous calamity. So those people are zakah eligible. All of the rest of it would be, to build infrastructure and stuff like that is sadaqah. So if you want to give zakah for that, I don't know how the fund is divided, but for sure there are going to be zakah recipients amongst those people without doubt. Our library has the Bible and other holy scriptures side by side with the Qur'ans. A person visiting ICCP said that was inappropriate and the Qur'an should be kept apart. Well, then maybe this is not the mosque for that person, and then they should go somewhere else where they don't read or write. But in our mosque, this is a mosque based on knowledge, based on the Qur'an and Sunnah. Even the Sahaba themselves, they used to read the Torah, they used to read the Gospels, and when they used to read the Qur'an, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't object. The Muslim we are the ummah of iqra. We are the ummah of read and recite, and we have an insatiable desire to learn and to know anything. So if anybody denigrates any book that we have or any form of knowledge, they have very little Islam in them, and this is not the mosque for them, because this is a mosque that prides itself on being open, and part of being opening is learning. And I can't believe a Muslim would say that. That's the most ignorant, most despicable, disgusting thing I have ever heard, honestly. To have that mentality, that's a sick person that needs to be healed. May Allah Ta'ala heal them away from us. When I pray at home alone, should I, and that's why these questions are anonymous, so I have the right to speak like this. If they were not anonymous, then I'd have to be like, I'd go home and have to hit the punching bag. But here I don't know who wrote this question. Of course not, nothing wrong with that. When I pray at home alone, should I recite aloud or is it okay to recite softly? You can recite softly, you don't have to belt it out, but softly so you can hear it. So if it's Fajr, Maghrib, well actually any of the prayers and you're praying by yourself, you need to recite so that you can hear it. It has to be audible to that amount. But you don't have to belt it out. In some schools of thought, the Imam recites the Fatiha. It's important that those following the Imam silently recite the Fatiha while the Imam goes on to recite the other surah. I was told that simply listening to the Imam reciting was not enough, and that my prayer will not be accepted if I do not recite the Fatiha myself. What is the correct thing to do? Whatever you are used to, because this is a difference of opinion. In the Shafi'i madhab, we have to recite the Fatiha, even if the Imam starts reciting a second surah. That's why, like when we pray witr in Ramadan, all of you are in ruku' and you see me still standing, because Anas is like on his last breath. He's like on turbo speed now. So he's like boom, 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 boom. I'm still reciting my Fatiha. In our madhab, we have to recite the Fatiha. In Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab, it's enough for the Imam's recital to be for the people, for you. So whatever you grew up doing, stick with that. This is an issue that we don't have to make an issue. And just because I do something, it doesn't mean that you have to do it. By the way, when I say that, I'm just explaining to you because I was trained a certain way and that's what I do. In performing wudu, is it obligatory to perform each act washing 3 times and say salawat with each act of wudu? No, what is obligatory is your face, your hand from your fingers to your elbows, right and left, your head and your feet from your toes to right above your ankles, 1 time each. That's it. That's the basic wudu. That's like wudu for people who are in a hurry. To do everything 3 times and to do the other acts, that is a sunnah. Of course, you should try to do the sunnah form as much as possible, but sometimes you're stuck Like the person that asked about the workplace. I mean, don't go and work and then do like, take off all your clothes and jump in the sink. I mean, that's not, you don't have to do that. Just you can make a simple wudu. So it's important sometimes to learn these things so you know how to expedite the act when you need to. So no, you don't have to wash them 3 times. And all of the dua that is said during the wudu and after the wudu, before, during, and after the wudu are all sunnah dua. For how long can I perform wudu wearing my socks and perform successive prayers and also perform wudu again as needed? Okay, when you make wudu in the beginning of the day on your feet and then you put on a pair of socks, the minute you lose your wudu while you are wearing the socks, at that moment you count 24 hours. So let's say I wake up in the morning at 6 in the morning, I make wudu, I pray fajr, I put on my socks, and I don't lose my wudu till 8 in the morning. Then I have until 8 the next day. That's the 24-hour period to wipe over my socks. Not 24 hours from when you put on the socks, 24 hours from when you lose your wudu after putting on the socks while you are in a state of wudu. And if you're traveling, you get 3 days with the same rules. So hopefully that, I don't think any of us want to wear socks for more than 24 hours anyway. So that's more than enough time for you to cover wiping over your socks for future wudu. My friend plans to marry a non-Muslim lady who is a Christian. Is it permissible? Likewise, what if a young lady wishes to marry a non-Muslim gentleman who is a person of the book? What does the Sharia law permit? Imam Abu Hanifa allows Muslim men to marry people of the book, only the Christians and Jews, because people of the book, remember, is a broader label. Any pre-Islamic religion that is organized for us are people of the book. So Hindus, Buddhists, Shinto, Confucius, all of those people are people of the book from the wide definition. But when it comes to this issue, they are not people of the book in all of the rulings. Imam Abu Hanifa allows a Muslim man to marry a Christian or a Jew. In the Shafi'i madhab, we no longer hold that position to be valid, but we don't need to split hairs on that. But there is no madhab, there is no sect, there is no opinion that exists in the history of Islam, the canon of Islamic law, that allows a Muslim woman to marry a non-Muslim man. What you have to understand about this is that it is about marriage is something that is divinely legislated. It's not something that's rational in all religions, in all systems. Of course, in the modern world, they want to undo that, and people, he's a good person, he's a good man. It has nothing to do whether he's a good man or a good person. A Muslim woman can marry a Muslim man, and he can be the most despicable, most corrupt, worst human being on earth, and the marriage would still be valid. But when you come and ask me, should she marry him? I'd be like, don't marry him, that's bad news. So it's not about just because something is halal, doesn't mean that it's good. And that's a gray area you have to learn to live with. So when I say that it's not permissible, he could be a saint. He could be floating and he's clean and he's honest and this and that. But if he doesn't say the kalima and he's not a Muslim, then in the Sharia it's not valid. Why? Because marriage is something that is divinely legislated. It's not something that's legislated through our rational system. Is it okay if I present a copy of the Quran to a non-Muslim? My friend has asked for a copy for his library. Yeah, we have many translations. You can, obviously you're not going to give him an only Arabic Quran. Does it make sense? So give him the translation, that's fine. Can a civil marriage be done at the county office before a formal nikah? I would advise that you do the opposite. The nikah should happen first, followed by the civil marriage, because then the civil marriage becomes, in our understanding, a recording of something that has already taken place, which is the nikah itself. So for us, marriage is a verbal contract. You don't even have to write it down. So if I verbally marry a woman and then we come and write it down, this document is not really the contract. All this document is authenticating and confirming something that has already taken place, which was the nikah. So when you do the civil marriage first and then you come to the mosque and you do the nikah, we reverse that, and then it's not the proper way of doing things. Unfortunately, many people do that actually. They come after they do the civil marriage. So we always advise, what we advise is you obtain the marriage license and then we do the nikah, and then right after the nikah, either myself or Imam Rifai, we fill out the paperwork for the civil marriage, and then you guys take the certificate and you deposit it wherever it needs to be deposited. What is the share of heirs determined by the Sharia law in case of an unmarried man who has a son and a sister? If the man has a son, if a man has a sister and he only has a son, the son takes everything, ta'siban. Is it permissible if the son and sister, yani the sister of the son, لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلَ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ, he will take twice the share of the sister. Is it permissible for him to add people other than the legal heirs to the will? Is there a limit that cannot be exceeded? A man dies, the man has a sister and the man has a son. That's it. The son will take everything. A man dies and he left a son and a daughter. Then the son will take double the daughter. Is it permissible for him to add other than the legal heirs to the will? Is there a limit that cannot be exceeded? This is called a bequest, a wasiyah. A man, anybody can leave a bequest up to 1/3 of their wealth to anybody and anything. But you cannot exceed 1/3 of your wealth unless everyone that will theoretically inherit from you agree that you will leave more than 1/3. So let's say I want to leave everything I ever have, which is very little, to ICCP. I can't, unless my wife and my children would all agree. But I can write 1/3 to ICCP without anyone's permission. And this comes from the Hadith, الثلث وثلث كثير. 1/3 and 1/3 is a lot. And this had to do with a man wanting to leave a bequest for his children, and he said, should I leave to the Prophet ﷺ, should I leave 1/3? And the Prophet ﷺ said, الثلث وثلث كثير. 1/3, and that's a lot. So you can exceed 1/3, but only if all of the people that will inherit from you will agree. But up to 1/3, you can leave. والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Anything online? These were good questions. You know, we should do that. We should get a young person to compile. I think there's like now almost we're nearing 1,000 questions. It's at least like 2 volumes of yeah. I've been thinking a lot about that. No, in that case, you prayed 5, it's like more barakah for you. This is sajdatay as-sahw. That's something else. I don't want to complicate things. Because sajdatay as-sahw, in and of itself, is a sunnah. So sometimes you're so forgetful that you even forget to do those 2 sajda, which is fine. So I'm just giving you the bare bones. Taban, yes, if you make a mistake in the prayer, then after you do the salam, you do the 2 sajda. Don't start over. That's one of the pathways of shaitan. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Just continue. Make it easy and continue. That's how the Sahaba were. One time, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, he was walking with some of his companions, and you know the homes there were only 2 stories. So there was a lady on the top of this home, and she had like a bucket of water, and she threw it out. You know, maybe she was cleaning and she threw it out, and the water splashed, and then it came on them. So the man, next to Sayyidina Umar, he's looking at his clothes, and he says, I ask you by Allah, is this water pure or najis? Is this pure or filthy water? And then Sayyidina Umar went like this, said, by Allah, do not answer this man. And then he kept walking. That's our Islam. Easy going, and why would you think that it's something filthy? You don't assume that. You just make things simple, inshallah.
Is it important to read the Quran always in Arabic? Or is it okay to read the translation in English?
Again, we don't want to be, it's not dualistic. We don't want to be either or. Read the Quran in Arabic when you can and struggle with that, and then read the Quran in a language you understand to understand the meanings of the Quran. Don't be either or, but we want to do both. Listen to the Quran. Also, that's the other thing I want to promote. You have to understand this is a gift that we have these apps. You can just have it playing. You can just have it playing. I'm not saying you have to listen to 3 hours of the Quran a day, but 10 minutes. Just start with 10 minutes and then add to that. Oh, it's in Arabic. Then your ear gets used to it. So don't be black and white either or. That's like the modern trap.
I think this is going back to your earlier question about Muslims doing what's not allowed in non-Muslim countries.
Okay.
Is it allowable to own a casino, strip club, or gentleman's club since it's permissible in the US? How can it be allowed to make money over something that Muslims cannot participate in ourselves? It seems hypocritical, and Islam is the exact opposite.
So, okay. So this is not anonymous. No. The question is based on the Hanafi position of the Aqood al-Fasida in non-Muslim lands. Could you own a casino, a strip club, or a gentleman's whatever establishment? No, I mean obviously no, because this is starting a business on something that is morally haram. The al-aqd al-fasid, a corrupt contract, means that there's a deficiency in the contract from the Sharia point of view, like buying and selling. Like we can't buy and sell dogs in the Sharia because the dog is considered najis. But there is a way around that because there are farmers and stuff like that. It's called raf' al-yad an al-ikhtisas, to remove your hands on having specific ownership for a specific time, which is a Sharia loophole, which I don't want to bore you with right now. But sometimes these things are necessary. So engaging in ribawi transactions with non-Muslims when it is legal and part of the norm of society in a non-Muslim land is one thing. And then me opening up a brothel or if prostitution is legal, that's something else. We're going to say absolutely that's haram. We don't want to be involved in something like that. So there are limits.
The next question: after wudu in the morning, could I put on socks for 12 hours? And when wudu breaks in 12 hours, could I make wudu touching the socks?
Yes, the 24 hours wiping starts when you break your wudu. So if you put your socks on at 6 in the morning and for some strange reason you didn't lose your wudu till 6 p.m., then yes, you can wait until tomorrow 6 p.m. by wiping, which means that you have worn your socks for 24 hours plus 12. But if you think about it, it's the same ruling because in those 12 hours you didn't make wudu. You did because you didn't lose your wudu. So the questioner is trying to be clever, but when we come back to it's the same 24 hours. Nice try.
We are in the blessed month of Rabbial Awwal. Are there any books, texts you could recommend to people to increase their love of Rasulullah?
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yani, I think one of the most underestimated things is the importance of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And by reading the biography and the chronology of the events of the Prophet's life ﷺ in as much detail as possible, it really pops out, his personality and his character trait. One of the best seerahs we have is the seerah of a Shibli Nu'mani, who was a Pakistani scholar. And what's interesting about that seerah is that seerah exists in English, Urdu, and Arabic. I mean, I have the Arabic and the English version, and they're very decent, actually, some of it I think was actually written in each of those three languages, if I'm not mistaken. But it's, I think the English is called like an encyclopedia of the seerah or something like that, because the first couple volumes he talks about the seerah, but the rest of the book, I think it's 7 or maybe 9 volumes, he talks about all of the other aspects of the Prophet's life, his family, the companions, and things like that. And the more you have a sketch of who the Prophet was, ﷺ, and not just like some mythic person in the past who we revere, but no, like I see him in front of me, I'm living the life that he lived. That is the greatest thing to motivate you to love the Prophet ﷺ. Then all of the other things after that reinforce that. But if you don't have those data points, Sometimes the other things they slip. I know that there's the Shama'il literature, which we taught at the mosque, and then there's also Khasa'is, the special traits of the Prophet. Those are all different genres. But I always advocate people to really go deep with the seerah of the Prophet. Of course, there are many seerah books. That's just one that I always like to recommend. But whatever language you feel comfortable in reading, my advice is to go. There's no shortage of what you can do with the seerah of the Prophet.
I think they want you to repeat the name of the biographer, Pakistani biographer.
Shibli Nu'mani. Shibli Nu'man. Or is it Nu'mani? Nu'mani, right? Or Nu'man only? Nu'mani, yeah. Shibli Nu'mani.
We have two more questions. If we end up praying 5 rakats in a prayer, do we have to do the sajda sahu?
You don't have to, but it's a sunnah too. I'm going to look it up and say. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more.
I'm just trying to look up the seerah.
One more question. Some people have said they have seen the Prophet ﷺ in their dreams. How does one know it is Prophet they have seen?
How do you know when you've seen the Prophet ﷺ? So there are several manifestations of seeing the Prophet ﷺ. One manifestation is to see him as his actual form ﷺ. Man ra'ani fil manam faqad ra'ani. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever sees me in their dream has actually seen me. فإن الشيطان لا يتمثل بي. The shaitan will not take the form of the Prophet ﷺ. But you can also see the Prophet ﷺ in your dream manifest as somebody else, maybe somebody else that's pious. So when you wake up, you're like, I dreamt of the Prophet, but you're like, wait a second, no, that was like my grandfather, or that was some sheikh that I studied with, or something like that. So sometimes a person is not ready to receive the full image of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he can manifest in a different way, but that is also a true vision. However, what is not protected is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the vision. And that's another important detail. So the hadith says, Man ra'ani fil manam faqad ra'ani. Whoever sees me in the dream has actually seen me. But the Prophet ﷺ never said, whatever I say to you in the dream is really me, because there can be something that is messed up in what is said. So anything that is said in a vision, in a dream, whether it be the Prophet ﷺ or some holy person, doesn't matter who, or another Prophet ﷺ, it has to be placed in the balance of the Sharia. Many people have gone astray and continue to go astray because of those type of visions. So you have to remember that the speech in the dream is not preserved. What is preserved is the physical appearance of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
One more question. I want you to repeat the answer for the Zamzam question.
Zamzam. The Zamzam question was about somebody takes Zamzam and just pours like a couple of drops in another bottle of water, and somebody told them that this dilutes like the Baraka of the Zamzam. And my response is that this is the way the modern mind thinks, which is not the way we think. In other words, you can't quantify Baraka. It's not like there's 1 part per million Baraka here and then 1 part per 10 million Baraka. It doesn't work like that. It's not a quantifiable thing. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in this blessed water, and when we drink the water, there's an accepted dua, as the Prophet ﷺ said. So just take it at that. Don't be like a chemist and quantify it. It's not going to work with this. So my advice was, we all have Zamzam, a little amount, and we want it to last, so we dilute it, and that's fine. It's still Zamzam, inshallah. Why don't you think of it the other way, that the Zamzam Baraka is so much stronger than the alkaline water at Costco that it overtakes it and it makes it all Zamzam? Why don't you think of it like that? It's like a chemical reaction that increases the Baraka. You know.
My question was also about Zamzam, but there's something more I want to add, that you told that in time the constituents of the Zamzam has been changed. It is artificially or naturally? How come?
No, just over time, naturally. I mean, it has changed. Because some of the descriptions of the past is that it was almost like milky and it's just I'm not a geologist. I don't know why, but this is sort of just over the passage of time.
And
The barakah is still the same, of course.
And about the zakat, you told that you can give zakat anytime. That we know. But usually, what we do, we pay zakat in the month of Ramadan. We assume that its ajr is 70 or 70 something times more. So we keep our zakat till Ramadan like that and pay in the month of Ramadan. What do you say about it?
The thing about zakah is the minute the money comes into your possession, that's when your zakah calendar starts. So you have to wait a year from that date. What you can do is you can pay your zakah early, up to 2 years early. So if you want to pay it in Ramadan for the extra blessings and it's an early payment of the zakah, that's fine. But don't delay paying the zakah. Like let's say you owe it 3-4 months before Ramadan and you're like, oh, I'm going to wait till Ramadan. Don't do that, because that money it's the right of the money. You want to get rid of that when it's due. So you can pay it early if you play around with your schedule so that the Ramadan payment is an early payment. That's okay. No, of course.
Obligatory acts of prayer.
Obligatory what? Acts.
Acts of
Oh, the obligatory acts of the fard prayer is you have to say the opening Allahu Akbar, reciting the Fatiha, and then just moving. Enough in each motion that there is a separation between motion and stillness. And then at the end, you have to do the last tashahhud and say salamu alaikum on your right. That would be the bare bone acceptable. I mean, obviously no one's going to pray like that, but you could move without saying Allahu Akbar. Those Allahu Akbar, those are extra. I mean, obviously I'm not saying you should pray like that, just like I'm not saying go open a casino, and I'm not saying go buy and sell alcohol. I'm just answering the question. The skeleton of the prayer is you say the opening Allahu Akbar, you recite the Fatiha, and then you just move into ruku'ah, pause, stand, pause, go in sujood, pause, sit, pause, go in sujood, pause, and then stand. And then you repeat that. The first tashahhud is a sunnah. And the last tashahhud you have to say, the whole tahiyyat and the prayers on the Prophet and his family, assalamu alaikum. That would be it. So this is helpful when you're teaching somebody who doesn't know how to pray, or somebody who just become Muslim, for example, and then you can build on the acts. But for those of us who grew up and are older and practicing, alhamdulillah, don't pray like that. Pray with all of the things. Really? Okay, mashallah. So Dala'ilul Khairat is a book, it's after the Quran, probably the most read, most copied book in the history of Islam. And it is written by a Moroccan scholar, Imam al-Jazuli, rahimahullah, who wrote this manual for prayers on the Prophet ﷺ. It's in 8 chapters. And there is a chapter for each day of the week. And then the last chapter, the 8th chapter, is read with the first chapter on Monday, because the Prophet ﷺ was born on Monday. So on Monday, you're going to read 2 portions. And then the rest of the days of the week, there's like a little chapter that you read for that day of the week. And it's all salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the most widespread, most accepted, most Mubarak book that we have after the Quran. You just dedicate a portion of reading it a day, and it inculcates in you the love of the Prophet ﷺ and the importance of salawat, because the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ is a form of dua from us to Allah, and there's nothing greater in the created world than Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is a great book. There are other manuals of prayer, but this is the most famous, and it's something that's readily available. And as I said, you can get it in English and transliterated, Urdu translation, so on. and so forth. So this is, one of the greatest things that you can do is get into the habit of reading a portion a day of this. It doesn't really take that long. I mean, it's not going to take more than 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
Zamzam water sold in halal stores, is it real?
Sold where?
Halal stores.
Yeah, you should assume that the Zamzam water that's sold online or at halal stores to be real. I mean, it would be very low if somebody was selling tap water and putting Zamzam. That would be pretty low of them. It's like the guy that said the Bible is wrong in the mosque. They're like in the same camp. So just assume that it's halal, inshallah.
Do I have to do wudu before shower even if I have my wudu?
That was the first question I answered. No, if you have your wudu, you don't have to make a second wudu. Okay? والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكرك الغافلون.